I've always believed that life is a series of carefully constructed moments, like a house built brick by brick. You choose each piece with intention, place it with care, and over time, you create something solid, something that can weather any storm. That's what I thought my marriage to Emily was. A fortress of our own making, built on trust, love, and promises we both swore to keep. For 12 years, I thought we were unshakable. I was wrong. My name is Daniel Harper, and I'm an architect by trade. I design homes for people who want their dreams made tangible, homes that tell their stories. I've always been good at seeing the bigger picture, at understanding how small details fit into a larger structure. Maybe that's why it took me so long to notice the cracks in my own foundation. Or maybe I just didn't want to see them. Emily and I met in college, back when I was a lanky kid with big dreams and she was the radiant girl who could light up a room with her laugh. She was studying art history, always talking about the way colors and shapes could tell a story without words. We fell in love fast, the kind of love that feels like it's always been there, waiting for you to find it. We got married at 25, settled in a quiet suburb outside Seattle, and built a life together. No kids yet, but we talked about it sometimes, late at night when the world felt soft and full of possibility. We were happy, or so I thought. It was a Tuesday in early spring when the first crack appeared. I'd been working late on a project, a sprawling modern house for a tech mogul who wanted his home to feel like the future. I was exhausted, my eyes burning from staring at blueprints and 3D models all day. I came home around 9, expecting to find Emily curled up on the couch with a glass of wine and one of her art books. Instead, the house was dark, the kind of empty dark that feels like it's holding its breath. Her car wasn't in the driveway. I texted her, figuring she was out with friends. *K, where are you? Just got home. No response. I waited, made myself a sandwich, and tried not to let the quiet get to me. By 11, I was pacing. Emily always texted back, even if it was just a quick, "Be home soon." I called her, but it went straight to voicemail. I told myself she was fine, probably just caught up in a moment. Maybe her phone died, but the unease settled in my gut like a stone. She came home at 12:47 a.m. I know because I was sitting in the kitchen, staring at the clock on the microwave. The front door clicked open, and I heard her keys jangle as she dropped them in the bowl by the entryway. She walked into the kitchen, startled to see me there, and for a split second, I saw something in her eyes. Guilt, maybe, or fear. It was gone before I could name it. "Hey," she said, her voice too bright, like she was trying to fill the silence. "You're up late. Where were you?" I asked, keeping my tone even. I didn't want to sound accusing, but the question hung heavy between us. "Oh, I was out with Claire," she said, turning to the fridge to grab a bottle of water. "We went to that new wine bar downtown. Lost track of time, you know how it is." Claire was her best friend, the kind of person who could talk for hours about nothing and make it feel profound. It sounded plausible, but something about the way Emily avoided my eyes, the way her hands fidgeted with the water bottle, made me pause. I wanted to believe her. I did believe her, mostly. But that night, as we went to bed, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted, like a blueprint redrawn without my knowledge. Over the next few weeks, the cracks multiplied. Emily started staying out late more often, always with an explanation: Claire, a work event, a gallery opening. She was an art curator at a small gallery downtown, so her schedule was unpredictable, but this was different. She'd come home smelling faintly of cologne, not hers, and her clothes carried the sharp tang of cigarette smoke, even though she'd quit years ago. I'd ask her about it, casually, and she'd laugh it off. "Oh, someone at the bar was smoking. You know how it clings." I started paying attention to the details, the way you do when you're designing a house and you know one wrong measurement could bring the whole thing down. Her phone was always face down now, when it used to sit carelessly on the counter. She'd take calls in the other room, her voice low and clipped, and when I'd walk in, she'd hang up quickly, saying it was just work. She started wearing new perfume, something musky and unfamiliar, and her wardrobe shifted. Tighter dresses, bolder colors, things she hadn't worn in years. I told myself I was being paranoid. Marriages have ebbs and flows, I reasoned. Maybe she was just rediscovering herself, shaking off the routine of our life. But the architect in me couldn't stop analyzing, couldn't stop seeing the patterns. And then there was the night I found the receipt. It was tucked in the pocket of her coat, a crumpled piece of paper from a hotel bar in downtown Seattle. The date was from 2 weeks ago. A night she'd said she was working late at the gallery. The receipt was for 2 drinks, a gin and tonic, her favorite, and a whiskey neat. I didn't drink whiskey. I stood there in the laundry room, staring at that receipt, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might crack my ribs. I wanted to confront her, to demand answers, but I didn't. I folded the receipt and put it back in her coat, telling myself I needed more evidence, needed to be sure. The next day, I did something I never thought I'd do. I checked her phone. Emily was in the shower, and her phone was on the nightstand, unlocked, a rare oversight. My hands shook as I opened her messages. There was a thread with someone named Alex, a name I didn't recognize. The messages were vague but damning. Asterisk, miss you already. Can't wait for next time. Asterisk, that was incredible. Delete this, okay? My stomach churned, bile rising in my throat. I scrolled further, but she'd deleted most of the history. What was left was enough to confirm what I'd been dreading. Alex. I didn't know who he was, but his name burned into my brain. I put the phone back exactly as I'd found it and sat on the edge of the bed, trying to breathe. When Emily came out of the bathroom, wrapped in a towel, her hair dripping, she smiled at me like nothing was wrong. I smiled back, but it felt like a lie. I didn't confront her. Not yet. I needed to know more, needed to understand the full scope of the betrayal before I could decide what to do. So I started watching her more closely, cataloging every detail like I was drafting a set of plans. I noticed how she'd linger in front of the mirror, adjusting her hair, her makeup, her smile, like she was preparing for someone else. I noticed how her laughter, once so free, now felt rehearsed when it was just the two of us. I noticed the way she'd pull away when I touched her, subtle but unmistakable, like she was saving herself for someone else. I started digging. I checked her credit card statements, something I'd never done before, and found charges at restaurants and hotels I didn't know about. I drove by the gallery one night when she said she was working late and saw her car parked a block away, near a bar I'd never heard of. I didn't go in. I couldn't bring myself to see her with him, whoever he was. But I knew. The architect in me wanted to deconstruct this, to understand every angle, every joint, every load-bearing wall of her betrayal. I started following her, discreetly, on nights she said she was out with Claire. One night, I saw her walk into a hotel downtown, her arm linked with a man's. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair and a confident stride. They didn't see me. Parked across the street in my car, my hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. I watched them disappear into the lobby, laughing, her hand on his arm like it belonged there. That was the moment I knew for sure. Emily, my Emily, was living a parallel life, one where I didn't exist. The pain was sharp, like a blade slicing through the blueprint of our marriage, but it was mixed with something else. Anger, cold and precise, like the edge of a drafting ruler. I didn't know who Alex was, but I was going to find out. And when I did, I was going to make sure they both paid for what they'd done. I started planning, not in the way I planned houses, but in a way that felt darker, more deliberate. I needed to know everything. Where they met, how long it had been going on, what she saw in him that she didn't see in me. I needed to understand the structure of their affair so I could dismantle it, piece by piece. I didn't want to just confront her. I wanted to expose her, to make her feel the weight of what she'd done. I wanted her to know that I wasn't the fool she thought I was. I hired a private investigator, a man named Tom who came recommended by a colleague who'd gone through something similar. Tom was discreet, professional, and didn't ask too many questions. I gave him Emily's schedule, the places she frequented, the name Alex. He promised results within a week. In the meantime, I kept up the charade at home, pretending everything was fine, kissing her goodnight, laughing at her stories, all while the anger simmered beneath the surface. The week felt like an eternity. I threw myself into work, sketching designs with a fury I didn't recognize, as if I could build a new reality where none of this was happening. But every night, I'd come home to Emily, to her lies, and the anger would flare again. I started imagining what I'd do when I had the proof, how I'd confront her, how I'd make her feel the same pain I was feeling. I didn't know what form my revenge would take, but I knew it would be precise, calculated, and devastating. Tom called me on a rainy Thursday afternoon. "I've got what you need," he said, his voice calm but heavy. "Meet me tomorrow. You're not gonna like it, but you'll want to see it." I hung up, my heart racing. The blueprint was about to be revealed. Every line, every angle, every betrayal laid bare. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed next to Emily, listening to her breathe, wondering how she could sleep so peacefully while our marriage crumbled. Tomorrow I'd know everything. Tomorrow I'd start building my revenge. The rain hadn't stopped by the time I met Tom at a diner on the edge of town. A place with greasy coffee and vinyl booths that smelled faintly of cigarette smoke and fried onions. It was the kind of spot where nobody asked questions, where people came to disappear into their own thoughts. Tom was already there, sitting in a corner booth, a manila envelope on the table in front of him. He looked like he'd seen too many stories like mine. Gray hair, tired eyes, a face that carried the weight of other people's secrets. I slid into the booth across from him, my pulse hammering in my throat. "Daniel," he said, nodding as I sat down. "You sure you're ready for this?" I wasn't. Not really. But I nodded anyway, my jaw tight. "Show me." He slid the envelope across the table. It felt heavier than it should have, like it was packed with more than just paper. I opened it with steady hands, though inside I was anything but steady. The first thing I pulled out was a stack of photographs, glossy and sharp, each one a knife to the gut. There was Emily, my Emily, walking arm in arm with the man I'd seen at the hotel. They were laughing in one photo, her head tilted back, her eyes bright in a way I hadn't seen in months. Another showed them at a restaurant, his hand resting on hers across the table. The worst was a grainy shot through a window, the two of them in a hotel room, her arms around his neck, their bodies too close for there to be any doubt. I forced myself to look at every photo, to memorize every detail. The man, Alex, was older than me, maybe early 40s, with sharp features and a smug confidence that made my blood boil. He wore expensive suits, the kind that screamed money, and his dark hair was always perfectly styled. I hated him instantly, not just for what he was doing with my wife, but for the way he carried himself, like he owned the world and everyone in it. Tom watched me, his expression unreadable. "His name's Alexander Reed," he said, breaking the silence. "He's a partner at a law firm downtown, specializes in corporate litigation. Married, 2 kids. Lives in a big house in Bellevue. I've got his home address, work schedule, and a list of places he and your wife have been meeting. It's all in the envelope." I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. I pulled out the rest of the file, receipts, hotel records, even a few screenshots of text messages Tom had managed to pull from somewhere. The messages were worse than I'd imagined. "I can't stop thinking about you. When can you get away again? He doesn't suspect anything, does he?" That last one hit like a punch. It was from Alex, and Emily's reply was a single word. "No." I sat there, staring at the evidence, the diner's hum fading into a dull roar in my ears. 12 years of marriage, 12 years of building a life together, and she'd been lying to me for months, maybe longer. The betrayal wasn't just in the act itself. It was in the secrecy, the planning, the way she'd looked me in the eye every day and pretended everything was fine. I felt like a fool, like a house I'd designed had collapsed because I'd miscalculated the foundation. "How long?" I asked, my voice low. Tom sighed, leaning back in the booth. "Based on what I've found, at least 6 months. Could be more. They've been careful, but not careful enough. 6 months. Half a year of lies, of her slipping away from me while I was too busy drawing blueprints to notice." I wanted to scream, to throw the photos across the diner, to drive to Alex's house and drag him out into the street. But I didn't. I sat there, my hands clenched around the envelope, and let the anger settle into something colder, something sharper. I was an architect. I built things, and now I was going to build a plan to tear their world apart. I thanked Tom, paid him in cash, and left the diner with the envelope tucked under my arm. The rain was coming down harder now, soaking through my jacket, but I barely felt it. My mind was racing, piecing together the next steps. Confronting Emily was tempting, but it was too simple, too quick. I didn't want her to just apologize and cry and promise to change. I wanted her to feel the weight of her betrayal, to understand what it meant to lose something she thought was hers. And Alex, he didn't get to walk away unscathed either. He'd taken something from me, and I was going to take everything from him. Over the next few days, I threw myself into research. I started with Alex Reed. His law firm's website had his bio: graduated from Yale Law, a rising star in corporate litigation, known for his strategic mind and unrelenting drive. The irony wasn't lost on me. I dug deeper, using public records and a few less-than-legal methods I'd learned from a hacker friend in college. Alex had a wife, Laura, a pediatrician who volunteered at a local clinic. They had 2 daughters, 8 and 10, and lived in a $1 million house with a view of Lake Washington. His social media was polished, full of family vacations and charity events, but I found traces of his other life: burner accounts on X, cryptic posts about late nights, and living for the moment. Emily was harder to unravel. I knew her better than anyone, or so I'd thought. I started tracking her movements more closely, using an app I'd installed on her phone while she slept. It wasn't something I was proud of, but pride was a luxury I couldn't afford anymore. The app showed her at the gallery, at coffee shops, at hotels. Always hotels. The same one downtown, a boutique place with a bar that served overpriced cocktails. I drove there one afternoon just to see it, to feel the place where my marriage was being dismantled. The lobby was sleek, modern, the kind of design I'd have admired under different circumstances. I sat at the bar, ordered a drink I didn't touch, and imagined them there, laughing, touching, thinking they'd gotten away with it. At home, I kept up the act. I kissed Emily goodnight, asked about her day, laughed at her stories. It was exhausting, but I needed her to think I was clueless. Every smile I faked, every touch I forced, was a brick in the structure I was building. A structure designed to collapse on them both. I started planting seeds, subtle things to make her nervous. I'd mention a hotel in passing, watch her face for a reaction. I'd ask about her day with just enough specificity to make her wonder if I knew something. She'd laugh it off, but I could see the cracks in her composure, the way her eyes darted away when I pressed too close to the truth. The plan took shape slowly, deliberately, like a blueprint drawn over weeks. I wanted to expose them, but not in a way that could be brushed off. I wanted it to be public, humiliating, impossible to ignore. I started by gathering more evidence. I hired Tom again, this time to get audio, maybe even video. He delivered a week later. A USB drive with recordings of their conversations, snatched from a bug he'd planted in the hotel room they used. Listening to them was torture. Her voice, soft and intimate, saying things to him she hadn't said to me in years. His voice, smug and possessive, talking about her like she was a prize he'd won. I listened to every second, my hands shaking, my anger crystallizing into something almost beautiful in its precision. The recordings gave me leverage. BT, they weren't enough. I needed something bigger, something that would hit them where it hurt most. For Emily, it was her reputation. She prided herself on being the perfect curator, the perfect wife, the perfect friend. For Alex, it was his career, his status, the carefully curated image of a successful family man. I started digging into his firm, looking for weaknesses. A contact in the legal world tipped me off about a case Alex was working on. A high-profile merger with rumors of shady dealings. If I could tie him to something unethical, it could ruin him. I reached out to a journalist I knew, someone who loved a good scandal, and fed her just enough to get her interested without revealing my hand. For Emily, the plan was different. I knew her gallery was hosting a big exhibition in a month, a showcase of local artists that she'd been planning for years. It was her moment to shine, to prove herself in the art world. I started thinking about how I could use that stage, how I could turn her triumph into her downfall. I didn't have all the pieces yet, but I was close. I could feel it. At home, The tension was unbearable. Emily was starting to notice my distance, the way I'd linger too long in silence. "Is everything okay?" she'd ask, her voice laced with something I couldn't quite place. Guilt, maybe, or fear. I'd smile and say, "Of course," but I could tell she didn't believe me. Good. Let her squirm. Let her wonder. The architect in me was in control now, measuring every angle, calculating every load. The structure of their betrayal was clear, and I was ready to bring it down. By the end of the month, I had a plan. It wasn't just about exposing them. It was about making them feel the consequences in every part of their lives. I wanted Emily to lose the gallery, her friends, her sense of self. I wanted Alex to lose his job, his family, his smug certainty. I wanted them to know what it felt like to have their world collapse. And I was going to make sure it happened in the most devastating way possible. The exhibition was 3 weeks away. That was my deadline. That was when I'd unveil my design. The night of Emily's gallery exhibition arrived like a storm I'd been forecasting for weeks. The air was thick with anticipation, not just for the art but for the culmination of my plan. The gallery was a sleek, modern space downtown, its white walls lined with vibrant paintings and sculptures from local artists. Emily had poured her heart into this event, and it showed in every detail. The carefully curated pieces, the soft lighting, the hum of conversation from Seattle's art elite. She moved through the crowd in a black dress that clung to her like a second skin, her smile radiant, her laughter practiced. To everyone else, she was the perfect curator, the perfect host. To me, she was a stranger wearing my wife's face. I stood in the corner, a glass of untouched wine in my hand, watching her work the room. Alex was there too, though he was careful to keep his distance. I'd seen him slip in earlier, dressed in a tailored suit, shaking hands with a few familiar faces from the legal world. His wife, Laura, wasn't with him, probably at home with their daughters, oblivious to the double life he was leading. I wondered if Emily knew he was married, if she cared. The thought made my grip tighten on the glass, but I forced myself to stay calm. Tonight wasn't about outbursts. Tonight was about precision. The past 3 weeks had been a blur of preparation. I'd taken Tom's evidence, the photos, the recordings, the receipts, and turned it into a weapon. I'd worked with my journalist friend, Rachel, who'd been digging into Alex's law firm. She'd uncovered enough dirt to make things interesting. Whispers of insider trading, a client who'd been quietly paid off to drop a fraud claim. It wasn't enough to put Alex in jail, but it was enough to make his partners question his judgment. Rachel was ready to publish a piece that would name him, not explicitly as a cheater, but as a lawyer whose personal indiscretions were raising eyebrows. She'd agreed to hold the story until I gave her the green light, which would come tonight. For Emily, the plan was more personal. I'd spent hours combing through her emails, her social media, her gallery's records. I'd found invoices for art supplies she'd never mentioned, paid for with a credit card I didn't recognize. I'd traced the card to a joint account she'd opened with Alex, a detail that made my stomach turn. It wasn't just an affair. It was a partnership, a shared secret life funded by money she'd hidden from me. I'd also found emails between her and a gallery board member, hinting at her plans to leverage this exhibition for a promotion, maybe even a move to a bigger gallery in New York. She was building a future that didn't include me. My revenge wasn't about confronting her in private, where she could cry and beg and promise to change. It was about exposing her in public, in front of the people whose opinions she valued most. I'd spent days designing a presentation, a digital slideshow that would play on the gallery's projector during her closing speech. It would include the photos, snippets of the audio, screenshots of their texts, carefully edited to avoid anything too explicit, but damning enough to leave no doubt. I'd hacked into the gallery's AV system, thanks to my old college friend's less-than-legal skills, and set it to trigger at the perfect moment. Emily would be center stage, basking in her triumph, when her world came crashing down. But that was only part of it. I'd also reached out to Laura, Alex's wife. I didn't tell her everything, not yet, but I'd sent her an anonymous letter with just enough information to plant a seed of doubt. A photo of Alex and Emily at the hotel bar, a copy of a receipt, a suggestion that she ask her husband where he'd been on certain nights. I didn't know if she'd confront him, But I knew the letter would make her question him. I wanted him to feel the walls closing in, to know that his perfect life was unraveling. As the evening wore on, I mingled with the crowd, playing the role of the supportive husband. People complimented me on Emily's success, and I smiled, nodding, agreeing that she was incredible. Every word felt like ash in my mouth, but I kept up the act. Emily glanced at me from across the room, her eyes catching mine for a moment. I saw a flicker of something, guilt, maybe, or unease, but she quickly turned away, laughing at something a guest said. Alex stayed on the opposite side of the gallery, but I caught him looking at her, his gaze lingering too long. It took everything in me not to cross the room and wipe that smug look off his face. The clock ticked closer to Emily's speech, scheduled for 9 p.m. I checked my phone, confirming that the AV hack was ready. I tested it twice, making sure the slideshow would play seamlessly, looping until someone manually stopped it. The gallery's projector was mounted above the main exhibit space, where Emily would stand to address the crowd. I timed it so the first image, a photo of her and Alex kissing in the hotel lobby, would appear just as she reached the climax of her speech. The audio would follow, her voice whispering to him, words that would echo in the silent room. At 8:45, I excused myself to the bathroom, slipping into the AV room instead. It was a small, cluttered space filled with cables and equipment, locked but easily bypassed with a key I'd borrowed from the gallery's maintenance guy earlier that week. I plugged my laptop into the system, double-checked the settings, and set the timer. My hands were steady, but my heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. This was it, the moment I'd been building toward for weeks. I returned to the gallery just as Emily took the stage, a microphone in her hand, her smile radiant under the spotlight. The crowd hushed, their attention fixed on her. She started speaking, her voice clear and confident, talking about the artists, the vision behind the exhibition, the importance of art in bringing people together. She was good, better than good. She was captivating, and for a moment, I almost forgot why I was there. Almost. At 9:03, the projector flickered. The screen behind Emily, which had been displaying a slideshow of the artwork, went black. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Emily paused, glancing back, her smile faltering. Then the first image appeared. Her and Alex, their arms around each other, unmistakable even in the grainy light. The crowd gasped, a collective intake of breath that seemed to suck the air out of the room. Emily froze, her eyes wide, the microphone trembling in her hand. The slideshow continued. Another photo, this one of them at a restaurant, his hand on her thigh. Then the audio kicked in, her voice soft and intimate. Asterisk. I wish we could stay like this forever. Asterisk. Alex's voice followed, low and smug. Asterisk. We will, baby. He'll never know. Asterisk. The words echoed, sharp and clear, cutting through the stunned silence. Emily's face went white, her mouth opening and closing like she was trying to find words that wouldn't come. The crowd was whispering now, some people looking away, others staring at her like she was a car wreck they couldn't ignore. I saw Alex in the corner, his face pale, his eyes darting toward the exit. He started moving, trying to slip out, but I'd planned for that too. I'd tipped off Rachel, who was waiting outside with a photographer. If he left now, he'd walk right into her lens, his shame captured for the world to see. Emily dropped the microphone, the feedback screeching through the room. She stumbled off the stage, her heels clicking frantically as she pushed through the crowd toward the back door. I didn't follow her. I didn't need to. The damage was done. The slideshow looped, each image a brick in the rubble of her reputation. People were already pulling out their phones, snapping pictures, posting to X. By morning, the art world would be buzzing with the scandal. I left the gallery quietly, slipping out a side door. My car was parked a block away, and I drove home in silence, the rain streaking across my windshield. When I got there, Emily's car was already in the driveway. I found her in the living room, sitting on the couch, her face streaked with tears. She looked up at me, her eyes pleading, but I didn't give her the chance to speak. You thought I wouldn't find out, I said, my voice calm, almost cold. You thought you could live two lives and I'd never notice. Daniel, I'm so sorry, she whispered, her voice breaking. I didn't mean for it to happen. It was a mistake. A mistake. I cut her off, my anger finally spilling over. 6 months, Emily. 6 months of lies, of sneaking around, of laughing at me behind my back. You don't get to call that a mistake. She sobbed, her hands covering her face, but I didn't stop. I built a life with you. I trusted you, and you threw it away for him. For what? A thrill? A chance to feel something new? She didn't answer, just kept crying, and I realized I didn't care what she had to say. I'd heard enough in those recordings, seen enough in those photos. I walked upstairs, packed a bag, and left her there. I didn't know where I'd go. Maybe a hotel, maybe a friend's place, but I couldn't stay in that house, surrounded by the ghosts of our life together. The next morning, Rachel's article went live. It didn't name Emily, but it didn't need to. The photos from the gallery were already circulating online, and the art world was merciless. By noon, I got a call from Tom, who'd been keeping an eye on things. Emily had been asked to step down from the gallery, pending a review. Alex's firm had put him on leave, citing personal conduct concerns. Laura had kicked him out, according to a mutual friend who'd seen her moving boxes to their garage. I didn't feel joy, not exactly. It was more like satisfaction, the kind you get when a design comes together perfectly, every line and angle exactly as you envisioned. I'd torn down their world, brick by brick, and left them to face the wreckage. Emily called me a dozen times, left voicemails begging me to talk, but I didn't answer. I wasn't ready to hear her voice. Not yet. Maybe not ever. I checked into a hotel and started sketching, not houses this time, but my own future. A new blueprint, one without her. The pain was still there, sharp and raw, but so was the clarity. I'd survived the collapse. Now it was time to rebuild.